And now comes the turn of Neander or Dryden himself. And Neander very brilliantly sums up all the discussions and arguments in defense of the English drama against the classical drama and the French drama. So, what are the main arguments of Neander or Dryden himself? We are discussing that now. So, Neander argues that the English dramatists are best in the presentation of just and lively image of human nature. That means the English dramatists have presented human nature in their plays with justness and liveliness, in a truthful and in a poetic manner. The French have failed to do so. Right? Then Neander argues that the beauties in the French poetry are the beauties of the statue and not of the living humanity. That means the beauties in the French drama lack the real spirit, lack the life, and they look like the beauty of a statue. Whereas the poetry in English drama is full of life. It comes from the living humanity. Consider, for example, the words of Lady Macbeth. Here is the smell of blood still. All the perfumes of Arabia will not sweeten this little hand. How poetic, right? Or consider Macbeth. Out, out, brief candle. Life is but a walking shadow. A poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage and then is heard no more. How poetic, right? Then Neander argues that in characterization and presentation of humors, the French cannot compare the English. So the English dramatists are far superior in characterization and in presentation of humors, that is, in presentation of the mental condition, in presentation of the mental state of the characters. Consider again, for example, the anxiety of Macbeth before murdering Duncan. Consider Hamlet's dilemma of to be or not to be. Right? Consider King Lear's rashness. Right? So, in characterization and presentation of humors, the French cannot compare the English. The English dramatists are incomparably superior to the French dramatists. This is what Neander wants to argue. Right? Then Neander defends and very reasonably and vehemently defends the mixing of the tragic and the comic elements in what is traditionally called tragicomedy, the kind of genre that mainly Shakespeare pioneered in English drama. So, Neander argues that the mixing of tragic and comic elements is apt and convincing. because we can glance from an unpleasant object to a pleasant one. Right? So here Dryden emerges as a liberal classicist. He does not blindly follow the Aristotelian compartmentalization of a play either as a tragedy or a comedy. And he defends and vehemently defends the English tragicomedy. Dear friends, in our Sanskrit tradition too, there is no compartmentalization as tragedy and comedy. Ultimately, drama is a presentation of life, and life is a mixture of the tragic and the comic elements. And that is why in our Sanskrit tradition too, in a single play, we find a beautiful blend of the tragic and the comic elements. Right? Then, Neander argues that the English plots are not barren like the French plots, but are full of variety. In fact, the English plots are very rich. Consider, for example, the plot in King Lear. In fact, there is double plot in King Lear. On the one hand, the main plot consists of King Lear and his daughters. And on the other hand, the subplot consists of Gloucester and his sons. So the English plots are very rich and they serve the variety of incidents that would engage the audience in the process of witnessing the English drama. Right? Then Neander argues that the English audiences revel in the direct presentation of combats and duels, whereas the French have too little to show on the stage. So Neander argues that the English audiences love the direct representation of combats and duels, because English culture is the culture full of heroism. The English culture is the culture of the valiant people. And that is why Neander here tries to make a distinction on the basis of literature as a cultural identity and argues that the English audiences revel in the direct representation of the combats and the duels. Right? Then, arguing in defense of the English drama, Neander makes a very strong point that the English drama is the best of all the dramas, whether the classical drama or the French drama, because there has been William Shakespeare, the greatest dramatist of all times in English drama. So Neander praises Shakespeare. But Neander's appreciation comes from a very mature critic. How brilliantly and yet how convincingly. Here Neander or Dryden pays tribute to Shakespeare. Mark the superlatives which are used in the description of Shakespeare as the greatest dramatist of all times, right? So Neander argues about Shakespeare, right? And appreciates Shakespeare. So he says, I quote, "He was the man," means Shakespeare, "he was the man who, of all modern and perhaps the ancient poets, had the largest and most comprehensive soul." So Shakespeare had the largest and most comprehensive soul. He could understand human nature so well because he had got the most comprehensive soul. He was naturally learned. That means Shakespeare was the genius. He was naturally learned. Shakespeare was the genius. He needed not the spectacles of books to read nature. That means Shakespeare's knowledge of human nature came from within and not from without. Shakespeare's knowledge of human nature is not at all a borrowed knowledge, not a kind of knowledge that comes after reading books, right? And Neander says about Shakespeare, he looked inwards and found her there. So Shakespeare looked inwards and he found human nature there. Right? So, what a tribute to Shakespeare. Only Dr. Johnson has been able to pay tribute to Shakespeare in such significant words as Neander or Dryden has used. So Dr. Johnson has written about Shakespeare, the stream of time which is continually washing the dissoluble fabrics of other poets passes without injury by the adamant of Shakespeare. Right? Friends, essay of dramatic poesy is an important essay in the history of English criticism and also in the history of criticism at international level, as this essay systematically opens up a new field of criticism called comparative criticism. So, there is a comparison between the ancients and the moderns, the French and the English, and there are also comparisons between the individual poets too in essay of dramatic poesy. And consider how brilliantly Dryden compares Shakespeare with Ben Jonson. Dryden does not say explicitly who is the superior of the two writers, yet we naturally understand who is superior of the two, Shakespeare or Ben Jonson. Right? So mark the words, what a tribute to both of the writers, and at the same time what a judgment on both of the writers, right? So I am quoting again Neander or Dryden. Shakespeare was the Homer or father of our dramatic poets. Johnson was the Virgil, the pattern of elaborate writing. I admire him, but I love Shakespeare. So Shakespeare was the Homer, the father of our dramatic poets. That means Shakespeare taught the later generations of dramatists the art of writing drama, the father of dramatic art, the Homer, right? And Ben Jonson was the Virgil, the pattern of elaborate writing. Ben Jonson's plays are a brilliant example of perfection in writing. Yet, I admire him, that is to say Ben Jonson. I admire him, but I love Shakespeare. So dear friends, understand the difference between admiration and love. I admire him, but I love Shakespeare. What a perfect appreciation of both of the great writers, and at the same time, what a perfect judgment that Dryden has provided, right? So, one more interesting discussion in Essay of Dramatic Poesy is about the use of rhyme in the drama. So Critic stands against the use of rhyme, and Neander defends the use of rhyme in Essay of Dramatic Poesy. So Critic's the basic argument is that drama is a presentation of life, and in real life people do not use rhyme. But then Neander or Dryden defends rhyme on the ground that drama is not a mimesis of life. In fact, drama is an aesthetic expression of life, and drama is an aesthetic expression of life for the audience and for the writer too. And that is why drama must be very poetic, and that is why rhyme serves this poetic purpose to drama. So when the poetic lines, right, spoken by a particular character on the stage sounds more effective. And dear friends, later on, even Wordsworth has emphasized the selection from the language of ordinary men that the poet must use. So not the language of ordinary men as it is spoken, but the poet must select and color the words with his own imagination. Right? So rhyme basically is connected with that, the aesthetic experience of life, the aesthetic presentation of life, right? So dear friends, on the whole, Dryden's contribution is really great. How great? let us try to sum up. First, Dryden emerges as a very original critic in the history of English criticism. He is not a servile imitator of the classical writers, nor is he blinded by the French writers. Right? Then Dryden, as a critic, emphasizes self-esteem, self-respect and self-reliance. And this is very important. Why to be blinded by other traditions? Let us realize the great qualities in ourselves, right? So Dryden's contribution in this respect is also so great, right? Then Dryden is an advocate of liberal classicism. Whatever is great in the ancient poets, we can accept that, but we can assimilate that according to the needs of our own times. So Dryden believed in the golden mean and in the change of the poetic and dramatic methods in the course of the time, because Dryden believed that literature ultimately is a dynamic force that develops with the development of a nation, right? Then Dryden provides and very systematically theoretical and judicial criticism in Essay of Dramatic Poesy. Then, as I have discussed, a new field of comparative criticism opens up in Dryden's Essay of Dramatic Poesy. So, dear friends, Dr. Johnson has very appropriately honored Dryden as the father of English criticism. So thank you so much.